Archaeologists thought they were opening a relic of history. Instead, they may have unlocked something older than death itself. Something wasn't right the moment they cracked the seal. A stench, not of decay, but of earth scorched by time, rushed out like a warning. The air around the opening shifted, as if disturbed by something ancient. Cameras flickered. One man swore he felt a pulse from the ground. And then, silence. Not the kind you expect in an old tomb, but the kind that presses on your ears, like the air itself was holding its breath. For nearly 2,000 years, the tomb of Lazarus had remained sealed, tucked into the limestone hills of Bethany, its entrance guarded by layers of rock and centuries of doubt. Scholars dismissed it, locals whispered about it, but no one had dared open it completely. Until now. What they found shouldn't have been there. Stay with this video, because by the end, one question will haunt you. Did Lazarus rise, or was something released? The first team to descend didn't make it past the initial chamber. The walls, barely visible through centuries of soot and dust, were marked with inscriptions. Not Aramaic, not Greek. Something older. Angular, symmetrical, almost mathematical. The patterns were precise, recursive, pulsing under flashlight beams like circuitry embedded in stone. And then, partially hidden beneath centuries of soot, something else. Not part of the wall, not buried, standing, as if placed. A sarcophagus, but it didn't match anything in the known historical record. One archaeologist dropped his instruments the second. His fingers made contact. He said it felt like touching something alive that doesn't want to be touched. The team paused excavation for the night. They left, but the tomb didn't sleep. That night, motion sensors triggered, repeating, precise. At exactly 3:33 a.m. Shadows, where there should have been none. Scratches appeared on the inner lid of the sarcophagus, fresh, and then the feed cut out. When the crew returned the next morning, the equipment was dead, batteries drained, stone around the tomb's mouth, slightly rearranged. Still, they pressed forward. What they discovered next rewrote more than history. It rewrote possibility. Buried beneath layers of stonework was a narrow passage, deliberately hidden, reinforced with copper brackets not native to the region. The metal shouldn't have survived the oxidation, but it had, untarnished, as if preserved, as if watched over. They followed the passage, torches dimmed as they moved further. GPS lost contact, but what they found at the end, it wasn't just a burial chamber, it was a chamber of containment. Surrounding a raised stone bed was a hexagonal seal, each corner embedded with a gemstone, garnet, topaz, amethyst, sapphire, all arranged in a pattern that matched celestial alignments over Jerusalem from 33 AD. At the center, a skeletal imprint. No remains, no bones, just a pressure. As if something had once laid there, and then vanished. The imprint glowed faintly in UV light. And then they noticed the scorch marks, microscopic burns across the walls, consistent with a sudden burst of thermal radiation. But there was no heat damage on the sarcophagus, just the imprint. And the carvings, now partially translated, began to suggest something horrifying. He who sleeps has seen beyond the veil. Do not call him again, but it was too late. As more of the tomb was exposed, the magnetic field around the chamber began to spike. Devices failed, clocks spun out, and something started humming in the limestone. Not audible, but felt. In the teeth, in the skull, in the chest. The team's lead technician collapsed. Seizure, eyes wide open, whispering one word before losing consciousness. Awakened. That was the final green light for external oversight. The Vatican dispatched observers within hours, not archaeologists, not theologians, security personnel. They came with scanners, relics, a locked briefcase, and strict orders to record nothing. They placed a relic on the sarcophagus lid, a palm-sized cross, forged from meteoric iron. The humming stopped, just like that. The air stabilized, lights returned, and then without warning, the lid cracked open. No force applied, no tools used. It split down the center with a hiss, like steam escaping from a pressurized vault. Inside wasn't what they expected. No remains, no fabric, no dust, just a single stone tablet, suspended half an inch in the air, levitating. It rotated slowly, like caught in orbit around something unseen. Ancient Hebrew was carved on one face. The other side, a fingerprint, human, scorched into the stone like it had been pressed, seared by something hotter than fire. They ran the tablet through every scanner they had. The material was unidentifiable, not basalt, not obsidian, nothing synthetic. Density defied calculation, and the fingerprint matched no known database. But here's the twist. When enhanced through digital reconstruction, the print resembled one found on a cloth relic stored in Turin. And that's when the fear began to set in. Not because of what they found, but because of what they didn't. There was no body, no remains, no biological trace. And yet, footsteps appeared in the dust behind the excavation team. Fresh, human, barefoot. They turned. No one was there, but the footprints were still warm. The dust shifted with no wind. One by one, cameras flickered back to life, without power. They began recording autonomously, lenses panning toward the tomb's entrance and stopping at nothing. A doorway of shadow, not pitch black, but moving, like water behind glass. The Vatican personnel froze. One whispered a prayer, another raised the cross again, but it no longer responded. The relic was inert, heavy, as if drained. Then came the sound. Not a voice, not an echo. A layered, low-frequency tone, like 1,000 human sighs filtered through metal. It resonated in the walls and in their bones. Instruments recorded no frequency, yet several members vomited on the spot. Others collapsed to their knees. The air pressure in the tomb dropped rapidly, equivalent to 20,000 feet above sea level. One man bled from his ears. And still, the tone persisted. They evacuated the chamber. But what followed them wasn't physical. That night, back at their temporary compound, 5 members of the team reported identical dreams. A room of white fire, a man standing backwards, and a voice, not heard, but understood. I was not sleeping. I was sealed. Every detail matched, down to the final moment. When the man turned, revealing a face with no eyes, only light. At sunrise, 3 stone tablets were found placed outside the tomb entrance. No signs of tampering, no footprints, each carved with perfect symmetry. Symbols that only appeared once before, in a forbidden manuscript held beneath the Vatican's Bibliotheca Apostolica, the Codex Invictus, a text so dangerous it was removed from all official records in 1634. One word from that codex appeared on the central tablet, unmistakable: anastasis, not resurrection, not rebirth, return. Inside the tomb, the sarcophagus had shifted. Its weight measured at over 3,000 kilograms. Now it had moved 4 inches without explanation. Ground-penetrating radar showed new fractures in the bedrock below it. Something had begun opening beneath. A new tunnel, not carved by tools, smoothed like melted glass. It curved downward, unnaturally smooth, temperature rising with each meter. The walls bore claw-like striations, but no living creature could fit the spacing. The team sent in a thermal drone. It lasted 4 minutes. Before its signal cut out, it captured one final frame. A chamber far below, lined with statues, or what they thought were statues. They were identical to depictions of Lazarus from Byzantine-era frescoes, except their eyes were covered, bound in iron bands. Each statue stood in silent posture, facing inward, towards something massive, something wrapped in linen, still moving. The footage was erased within an hour of being recovered. By noon, the Israeli Antiquities Authority and Vatican representatives issued a joint blackout. Public records of the dig were sealed, maps altered, teams disbanded, but not before one archaeologist, Dr. Elia Ram, leaked a single document. A page from his personal notes, scanned and shared through encrypted channels. It contained coordinates, not to Bethany, to a hill outside Aleppo, Syria, once home to a forgotten sect called the Naharim, a pre-Christian mystic order rumored to possess a manuscript known as the Voice Beyond Dust. According to Ram, they claimed Lazarus did not die once, but 4 times, each time brought back, each time less human. Their records describe the final resurrection not as a miracle, but a containment procedure. The manuscript outlined a ritual involving precise lunar phases, astronomical alignments, and a sarcophagus of binding, forged from volcanic rock under divine instruction. The purpose? Not to honor the dead, but to anchor something that refused to stay gone. And the trigger for release? Human contact, recognition, and blood. 1 week after the tomb was opened, a nearby monastery reported a mass disappearance. 17 monks, no signs of forced entry, meals still warm, candles still lit. Security footage showed them walking out the main gate, in complete silence, eyes open, hands folded. A final freeze frame captured all 17, looking directly into the camera at 3:33 a.m. Back in Bethany, the weather shifted. Storms without rain, thunder without clouds. Animals, especially birds, vacated the area. Locals spoke of hearing whispers at night, always in threes. 3 syllables, 3 knocks, 3 pulses of light near the tomb entrance, captured by infrared sensors, but invisible to the eye. A final attempt was made to reseal the tomb. Heavy concrete, reinforced steel. Burial sigils from 3 religions etched into the barrier. They failed. Every attempt crumbled within hours. Tools snapped. Workers grew violently ill. One man lost consciousness and awoke speaking fluent Aramaic, a language he had never studied. He repeated one phrase over and over. The 4th breath was never his. That's when authorities sent word to Rome. A special Vatican division was activated. Not clerical, not military, something else. They didn't come with weapons. They came with mirrors, not ordinary glass. These were convex, obsidian-polished, ringed with gold and copper coils. They hummed, quietly, before even entering the tomb. Carried like relics, they were positioned in a circle around the entrance, facing inward, never reflecting the environment. Only darkness. But in their center, an image began to appear. Slowly, grainy at first, a face, ageless, motionless, eyeless. It was not a reflection, it was a response. The Vatican agents began reciting an incantation, one that had not been spoken aloud since the Council of Toledo, 447 AD. The air around the tomb turned brittle. Wood snapped. Water turned viscous. One mirror cracked, releasing a sharp shriek. Not from glass, but from inside the tomb itself. And then, the pressure dropped again. This time, worldwide. At 3:33 a.m. GMT, Seismic monitors across 7 countries registered a synchronized micro-tremor, barely measurable but identical in waveform. The epicenter, directly beneath Bethany. At the exact same time, 3 satellites lost orientation for 7 minutes. Solar panels overheated. One telescope array facing that region of Earth recorded a black spike, a sharp, inexplicable drop in visible light. It wasn't an eclipse, it was an absence. And then the messages began. Digital distortion first. Random characters across screens, rearranging into phrases. Not spam, not malware. Handwritten style, embedded into systems disconnected from any network. Phrases that matched forbidden apocryphal texts, long thought destroyed. He was called because you forgot. You broke the rhythm. Now it returns. He was the Lazarus you buried. This is the Lazarus you awakened. Security footage in the tomb's perimeter showed flickers of movement, frame by frame, an emaciated figure, cloaked in strips of fabric, appearing between blinks of light. It never moved. It simply shifted position. Each time, closer to the tomb entrance. No footsteps, no animation. Until the final frame, when the figure was gone and the sarcophagus lay open again, not empty. Inside, a second tablet. This one with a map, but not of Earth as we know it. The continents were rearranged, distorted, yet beneath the warped geography, familiar outlines remained. A hidden grid of ancient temple sites, Babylon, Göbekli Tepe, Eleusis, Nanmadol, all connected by perfect lines intersecting at Bethany. At the center, a symbol, a fusion of a circle and flame, identical to carvings discovered under the altar of St. Peter's Basilica, sealed off to the public since 1942. The implications detonated behind closed doors, and yet something else slipped through. A letter leaked from within the Eastern Orthodox Patriarchate claimed that Lazarus, after his biblical resurrection, never spoke of what he'd seen during death because he wasn't allowed to. The letter included a chilling quote, allegedly taken from an untranslated segment of the Book of Enoch. Some men are returned not by heaven, but because hell has no place left for them. This fragment was passed through AI linguistic analysis. The model flagged an anomaly. Embedded rhythm patterns in the original text mirrored the electrical discharge signature recorded when the second sarcophagus cracked. Language, it seemed, was not just communication. It was an activation protocol. The mirrors had only slowed it, but they hadn't contained it. The Vatican ordered all personnel withdrawn. The site was sealed, not with stone, but with an electromagnetic dome powered by 5 Tesla coils driven into the ground around Bethany. Their purpose? Not to block entry, but to scramble whatever was trying to leave. Unmarked aircraft were spotted above the area within hours, and then silence again. But the world was no longer still. In remote villages near the Nile, near the ruins of Amarna, locals reported visions. Men speaking ancient tongues, walking through riverbeds without casting shadows. Near the Vatican, 22 black birds were found dead, each with a single word etched into their feathers: return. In Buenos Aires, a retired physicist claimed his clocks reversed course at 3:33 a.m., not just once, but 3 times in a row, all incidents connected by one thread. Each location mapped precisely to the intersections of the tablet's distorted world grid. Lazarus was never meant to be a miracle. He was a lock, and something had turned the key. The electromagnetic barrier didn't last. Power spiked globally. Grids overloaded. One coil exploded, burning not outward, but inward, as if consumed. Surveillance captured the moment of collapse. A shape, barely visible, exiting the tomb. Faceless, flowing, more suggestion than solid, but it moved with purpose, not away from the tomb, toward Jerusalem, and one final signal was transmitted from the site before total blackout. 3 glyphs, matching no known language, but placed into AI-assisted analysis, they translated phonetically into one phrase: "The threshold breathes." And across the old city, the wind changed. In the western wall tunnels, ground-penetrating radar began picking up rapid subsurface anomalies, tunnels within tunnels, spiraling downward beneath the Temple Mount. Not ancient, not modern, undated. Every attempt to scan deeper failed. One operator collapsed from acute vertigo, swearing the tunnels weren't empty. They were listening. At the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, seismic monitors recorded rhythmic vibrations, pulsing every 33 seconds, forming a pattern that, when mapped, outlined a sigil found on the Lazarus tablet. One priest, hearing the pattern, began weeping uncontrollably, not from fear, but recognition. He later confessed that he'd seen the sigil before, not in scripture, but in a dream he'd had every night since childhood. The Vatican issued no statement, but its emissaries began arriving in cities across the globe: Istanbul, Addis Ababa, Krakow, each one carrying identical black briefcases, escorted by armed guards in civilian clothing. The briefcases were never opened in public, but in each case, shortly after their arrival, an ancient relic was removed from private archives, silently, without media, without records, and never returned. Meanwhile, the mirrors reactivated on their own. Still cracked, still bleeding that internal hum, they turned, on their own, away from the tomb and toward the sky. Through them, night didn't reflect, only a deep reddening, like something beyond the stars was leaning closer. Observatories scrambled. One astrophysicist watching from Mount Scopus passed out after claiming a portion of Orion's belt had blinked. At the same moment, a child in southern Lebanon, mute since birth, began screaming one word in flawless Latin: "Exsiluit." He rose. It rose. Earth's electromagnetic field registered a micro-reversal at 3:33 UTC, only for a fraction of a second, but long enough to alter migratory patterns, disrupt compasses, and cause 2 pilots to report seeing a luminous spiral tearing through the clouds above Jerusalem before vanishing. But that spiral wasn't a cloud formation. It was a shape carved into the tomb's 3rd tablet, still suspended mid-air beneath Bethany, now spinning faster each hour. Within Vatican archives, a restricted AI-driven language model, codenamed Argos, was tasked with decoding the final carvings found in the 2nd chamber. What it returned wasn't a translation. It was an image, not of Lazarus, not of Christ, but of 3 figures bound at the wrists, heads tilted back, mouths open, releasing light. One of them wore a crown made of thorns, inverted. The AI then shut itself down, permanently. Across 3 continents, ancient reliquaries began reacting simultaneously. The veil of Manopello faded for 17 seconds. The blood in the Holy Grail reliquary at Valencia turned from red to black, then back again. And in Ethiopia, the guarded ark, rarely viewed by anyone, was reported to emit a low tone, shaking its housing stone loose for the first time in 800 years. And still, the figure moved. It crossed into the Garden of Gethsemane. There, olive trees, over 2,000 years old, began to weep resin, thick, amber-like tears that crystallized instantly upon touching the ground. When analyzed, the resin bore no botanical markers. Instead, it shared molecular fragments identical to a compound found in ancient burial cloths and in the shroud of Turin's scorched fibers. linguists reviewing rare Syriac texts uncovered one final anomaly. A suppressed gospel fragment, dated to 60 AD, referenced a second Lazarus, not the brother of Mary and Martha, a man who was born without a soul but carried a voice not his own. The text ended abruptly with the line, "He was not a man. He was the memory of a mistake." In Jerusalem, animals fled the city. Silent flocks of birds reversed migration. Cats disappeared. Dogs howled toward nothing. And underground, beneath the Church of Mary Magdalene, pressure sensors detected a new cavity forming, not collapsing, expanding. Inside, the last operational mirror captured a single frame before shattering. A silhouette, arms outstretched, wrapped in decayed linen, the head draped in cloth, not over the face, but the eyes. Beneath it, Hebrew letters burned into stone, forming one phrase, "I was called by name." But the name was not mine. And somewhere, beneath the soil of a city that has seen every kind of prophecy fulfilled and betrayed, something opened its eyes.